Welcome to Best in Faction,
the next generation,
a podcast where Dark Angel Terminators can rot in hell.
I'm Tyler.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Lucas, baby.
And today is the day of celebration. My oh my, we have been wandering through the desert for 40 freaking years. It's actually been like 6 weeks or something that Dark Angels have actually been an oppressive menace force. But they're done. Ding dong, the witch is dead. We are here today to celebrate the life, the death, and pray to God for anything but the resurrection of our dear friends, the Dark Angels. It is the day after the Q2 balanced data slate has been dropped in 2023 for 9th edition Warhammer 40,000. We're here to react, give you some first impressions, some predictions about what's going on in the meta, how this is going to affect each of us personally in our journeys and our upcoming tournaments, singles, teams, and otherwise, and bring you some of that hot and spicy TNG spunk that you have come to know and dread. But before we get into any of that fun stuff, got to check in with the boys, do a quick whip around. How we doing today, boys? How you doing, Lucas?
I'm doing great. Just been lots of exciting stuff in 40K lately with all the 10th edition rumors that I'm trying my best to only pay somewhat attention to. And then the data slate as well. And lots of tournaments coming up. So just feeling super excited about things. Also, some other fun Warhammer-related things came out. One of my favorite games, Total War, had the Chaos Dwarf DLC come out. And I'm usually just an Orc fan through and through, but Chaos Dwarves are one faction that I'm a big fan of, so have been enjoying them over the course of the last 24 hours as well. So just feeling good about all things Warhammer right now, really enjoying things, having a lot of fun, and just experimenting with lists as well. I'm feeling like pretty solid about my my Orc list right now, so I'm just trying new things. Playing some World Eaters, continuing to play some Chaos Knights, experimenting with some new lists for teams, and just having a lot of fun. So yeah, it's going great. How about you, Nick? How you doing?
I am doing well. I have a few events coming up this month, like a few smaller TTs, and then we got a GT at the end of the month. So it's kind of been this, weird purgatory state where I know that the game is about to change, hopefully, and I'm not quite sure what I want to play. There's a lot of cool armies right now. We've been testing a lot of fun different armies, and especially for teams, which is super cool. Coming up in June, just kind of thinking about what we want to play. So I'm glad that it's finally here. I'm glad that I can finally make some decisions, and I'm glad that I can finally get some practice that feels meaningful again. So looking forward to playing practice games today, RTT, Sunday. I don't know. Just got a lot of practice coming up for the next 3 weeks, which is going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, pretty well. How are you doing, Tyler?
Very cool, very cool. I am similarly in a fantastic mood in the world of 40K right now. Played a couple of really fun games recently. Similar to Lucas, I feel like I have my main GSC build, the kind of stuff I took to Rosehammer, really locked in and dialed, and I know what to do with that in basically every situation that I'm concerned about at the moment. So it gives me a lot of freedom and opportunity to branch out and try more interesting things. And now that those things don't have to contend with 30 Dark Angel Terminators ever again, that's even more fun. I've been playing around with a Rusted Claw build that Bellethuris won that big tournament with in Australia. It's crazy because on paper, it looks like every other Genestealer Cult build, but in practice, it's nothing like any of the other Genestealer Cult builds because there isn't a drop turn. You put almost nothing in reserve. You start all the neophytes on the table, which is just wild. It's a ton of fun. So I've been really enjoying playing around with that, and also playing around with some other truck heavy builds and whatnot. It's just a whole bunch of cool stuff. So that's been really exciting. Similarly, looking forward to some more practice today, trying out a couple of new stuff going into a weekend. And yeah, my gosh, do we have a calendar booked up front? Thanks, Max, for the compliment on my hat. Says it's a nice color green. Big shout out to my grandmother Rose for crocheting this for me. I think not an expert in the world of needlecraft, just an expert in nothing actually, but trying to be one in 40K. So. As much as I would love to sit and chat about nonsense for a while, we're going to be a bit of a brief episode today. We're going to get right into it. Let's talk about the data slate. We're going to start off by just running through what's in it, and we'll give some comments on each of the things, and then we'll take a step back and look at some bigger picture stuff. So, do you guys have the data slate out in front of you, or a set of changes? I can read the first couple things if you don't.
I'll pull it up right now. Why don't you go ahead and start reading?
You know I got it downloaded, dude.
Okay, cool.
Already bookmarked.
Let's eat a little bit of dessert first here, or Nick. Tell us about what happened to Dark Angels and Space Marines in general, but especially Dark Angels.
Yeah, so I mean, a big question going into this slate for all of us was how are they going to nerf Dark Angels? Because, I mean, they were like without a doubt the best army in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So their win rate was climbing. I think a lot of us thought they were going to go like a little more relaxed on it, like something like Baby Transhuman and like the doctrine change. But surprisingly, the being able to sit in doctrines all game was not changed at all. Like you can just sit in dev all game still. But how they fixed Dark Angels was they just deleted the 4th bullet point of the Inner Circle ability, which is the Transhuman, just completely gone. So I guess the only thing that makes Dark Angels Terminator special now is their OBSEC if you're all Inner Circle. And other than that, they're just
they
I guess
can't
they're
fall back under certain situations, and they are fearless.
Doctrine. Yeah, and how they interact with the Assault Doctrine too. Their Super Doctrine getting the reroll wounds
for sure.
Characters and things with 8 or more wounds.
Yeah, but like that's not tied to the Inner Circle keyword, just to the Deathwing keyword.
But
yeah.
just
so
trying to be like, Inner
Yeah.
Circle.
Inner Circle now is just fearless and can't fall back under certain situations. Interesting. What else? That was not the only change that happened to Marines, though. As we know, Dark Angels are not the only flavor of Marines that have been punishing the meta so hard. Iron Hands are also ludicrously powerful, putting up insane numbers, especially as the stat check people will love to point out to you when you focus only on Iron Hands successors, which is a nice way of filtering through for just the people who really know what they're doing. So what else happened to Marines in addition to the change of Inner Circle?
Yeah. So another thing that people were pointing out that made Marines super good was the secondary Codex Warfare. That was the secondary that you could score 2 points for killing a thing with a heavy weapon in the Dev Doctrine, and then 1 point for associated weapons in the other doctrines. There was no cap on it, so you could do ridiculous stuff like wait for a turn with Iron Hands and then drop your army and score 14 points in 1 turn by killing 7 units. That has now been changed, so the most you can get from each doctrine is 5 VP.
What a fantastic change. What do you think about this change, Lucas?
Thank God. That's Codex Norfair was like the stupidest secondary in the world because, like Nick said, you could just score it all in 1 turn. And also the way the Devastator Doctrine changed, you didn't have to score it all on turn 1. So you like you said, you could just drop it on turn 2 and score 100 million points on it. So big fan of this change. It makes it operate more like what the secondary is like supposed to be on paper, right? Which is you play this little mini game where you try to line up the right weapons on the right targets, and if you do that, then you're rewarded with points. It still is a little bit silly that like the easiest weapons to get kills with, the heavy weapons, are like give the most points, and you can also start getting points on it the earliest. So that's a little bit goofy, but it's definitely now like more a reasonable secondary. I mean, only time will tell if it's still insane. I don't personally think it will be. But it also opens up more chapters to be able to take it. People like Space Wolves might be a little bit more incentivized to take it now that there's like some points spread out across the different doctrines. Especially because those chapters, like Wolves, tend to take weapons from each type. Like they'll on turn 2, when they're starting to go in, they might kill some stuff with their melted guns and get some points. And then obviously they can kill stuff in Assault Doctrine. So big fan of this change. Makes it really cool and interesting. Played a game against Codex Warfare last night, and it definitely was a lot more fun. And Max actually had to think about scoring the points instead of just getting them all for free, which is what you want out of a secondary.
I should mention, in addition to this, they put out an FAQ for a couple of things. One of the things they put out the FAQ for was that anything that makes you count as being in a different doctrine applies for Codex Warfare. So if you're using the stratagems, the warlord traits, the whatever, the being Wolfen, those things will still work. I have a hot take on this, which is that I actually think this is not very good for Space Wolves, because I don't think that Space Wolves want to use their heavy weapons to kill things in Devastator Doctrine, like at all. I find and that they want to rush through the doctrines much quicker, and most of their heavy weapons are starting an outflank usually, so they're not on the table turn one. That's been my experience, at least. Lucas seems completely incredulous to this.
I think a chapter master and lieutenant squad of Space Wolves that spend 1 CP on keen senses, desolators, and there's 10 of them, can just delete 2 small units and get 4 points. That seems.
Oh, I completely forgot about desolators. Yeah, absolutely. Never mind. Yeah. In a world where Desolation Marines exist, never 100% take that back. If Desolation Marines get hit with something else on their own in the future, or they're not super relevant, the way the Space Wolves were playing before they existed, I don't think they're super. Like Long Fangs, I don't think are scoring this. Is what I was trying to say.
Agreed.
But yeah, so we'll see how that works out. And also, not necessarily everyone has a lot of stuff that Desolation Marines want to be going after super early. And as the meta shifts to deal with them more and more, we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think this is exactly what a kill secondary should be. Use your core mechanics and in a way that is somewhat restrictive to play a mini game. So it's not just kill stuff; it's kill very specific things at very specific times. There's very obvious counterplay for how to deal with this. We'll see how it shakes out in practice, but I think this is a fantastic change for everyone involved.
Agreed.
Yeah. So did Marine, and I don't think Marines got anything else.
They did get some changes. Death Watch got some changes.
Oh, Death Watch. Yeah.
Operationally, like their doctrines now work. Don't ask me exactly all the nuances of how that did or didn't line up. But basically the way it worked in Arcs of Omen Part 1 was Death Watch doctrines just didn't work for some reason or another. And they've now fixed that. And they've also made a change to the Cull Order secondary, which is the Death Watch specific secondary that says you target certain battlefield roles, and if you wipe them out, you get 5 points. There's now there's a points floor to that, where if you kill at least, I think it's if you kill, let me just make sure I got this right. I think it's if you kill 1 unit from each battlefield role, you still get 3 points. At the end of the battle, for each battlefield role that was selected, score 3 VP if 1 or more units was destroyed, and 5 if you destroy all of them. So it pumps up the floor a little bit on that in case you happen to play a really slow game. You don't suddenly end up with zero points that are really, really sad. So yeah, that's now super spicy secondary for Death Watch.
Yeah, Death Watch were in need of a lot of help. I think that this is definitely putting us in the right order. To give the specifics that Lucas wasn't so sure about on the way the doctrines work, the way it used to work was back when Space Marines had to cycle through, Death Watch instead just said, okay, cool, I get the maximum number of turns that I could have of each doctrine, and I just get to pick the order. But they still had to do that, so only 1 turn of Dev. They just picked what it was. So now, what it is that Death Watch literally just pick their doctrine every single turn. Yep. They just get to pick their doctrines. Cool. It's an additional amount of flexibility. It makes them feel more like Death Watch. Fine. I think these are good changes. I don't think Death Watch are going to be taking over the meta anytime soon. Honestly, because they're a really deep book that I don't think anyone at this stage in 9th is willing to put the time into. But if you've got a buddy who's a hardcore Death Watch fan, I'm sure Fred Forsman is very excited about this. Actually, I'm sure he thinks it's not enough and is complaining about it. Love you, Fred. Anyway. So that's Marines. Who should we cover next? What do we think was the next biggest change?
We just go straight down the line. Slate.
Sounds good. Drukari up next. Then Drukari got a very exciting change here, which is that actually a removal from the slate, which is that they put core back on pain engines. Nick, you want to do you have the list at least somewhere in your head of what exactly that's going to accomplish for them?
Not off the top of my head. You just played against it the other day, so
yeah,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I think Lucas. Yeah, if you know the list, Lucas, please ramble it off because it's long.
Yeah. So it gives them the homunculus's +1 toughness aura back. It gives them access.
I think that's the biggest one. Yep.
It gives them access to the reroll wound stratagem for Coven's core. it gives them access to the Lieutenant Aura from the Chronos, and also the Captain Aura from the Homunculus in the Army of Renown. And then it also gives them access to the Revives, and I don't know if the Chronos' Pain Siphon, the thing that when you kill a unit, when a friendly unit kills an enemy unit, you can pick that friendly unit to count as Battle Round 5 for Power from Pain. I don't know if that's core tied. I think it might be.
They can definitely do it now. It happened. I don't know
now.
if it's core tied, but they definitely can do it. Whether they could or not yesterday, who knows? But yeah,
and then another thing for the resiliency is the Kronos' Revive is core locked, so you can bring whole pain engines back, even if it's just that one wound. It means that like another model gets to activate for a phase, which is really big.
Yeah, you can be careful in your sequencing of fight phases, right? And have guys coming back in the middle of activations. And then when the next unit fights what they came back in, that's really big. And also it's every single dude they kill is picking up. So if you get into a horde of, a squad of guardsmen or something, like you kill 10 guardsmen, you get a pain engine and another one at 3. Like it's just so much reviving. I don't personally think, like I said, I played this last night. I don't think that it's back in any meaningful capacity. I don't think we're going to see Thick City taking over tables again. There's a lot of really obvious counterplay, and the army has issues at range banding, and it doesn't have a whole lot of obsec. But the Army of Renown for them is suddenly something that I think you will see some Drukari players busting out, and I think it's a lot of fun. So I think this is a great change that puts Drukari back in the game, which they frankly were not outside of team settings for a while. What do you think about this change, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I was kind of joking before we got the slate. Like, what if the final slate is just them removing every restriction and we just have freaking battle royale going on here? So removing some of the restrictions as the edition's about to end is cool. I'm glad they didn't go crazy with it. Like, if they also unnerfed the -1 damage, then it'd be like, okay. But we're probably not going to see a lot of meta hopping in this last 2.5 months anyways, because people, I don't know, at least for me, I kind of hold my purchases at the end of an edition because I don't know what's going to be good next edition. I want to wait and see. So I think the only people that are really going to play this are those that have it lying around from when they played Thick City, and I think they're going to have a lot of fun with it, which is cool. It's kind of nice to be like, hey, before this Army of Renown goes away, if you want to mess around, you can do it, which is something people have been asking for a while, and I don't think it breaks the game. So good change in my mind.
I definitely don't think it plays the game. Since Dark Eldar have come out, obviously we had a bunch of other broken books that in some ways contested Dark Eldar for being very strong. And then since Thick City was nerfed a year and a couple months ago, we had Custodes, Tau, Tyranids, both Knights, tons of strong books over and over and over again. I don't think Dark Eldar really hold a candle to the amount of damage those books can bring to the table. So I personally feel like pain engines won't really shake up the meta that much, but it'll be cool that they're a decent option again. So I could be wrong about that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also just a fun army to play and to play into. So I'm really excited to run into it at early tournament rounds and stuff like that, because it's cool. It has cool factor as long as you have converted grotesques or prints, because the actual model singular is awful. Next section going down the data slate is Harlequins. No changes as far as I understand, just the old stuff as it was. We talked about Deathwatch. Talking about no changes, Demons 0. How do y'all feel about that?
Fine. I think Demons are strong, but not insane. I think they have a lot of varied builds that are cool and not miserable to play against, like a lot of the strongest armies typically are. It's always fun to play against Demons. There's an interactive, crazy game going on. There's OBSEC, there's a little bit of shooting, there's psychic, there's combat, there's big monsters, there's infantry. There's everything you can do with Demons. I'm glad they didn't change anything.
Yeah. I know some, Demons are considered very strong right now, but unlike other very strong armies, they never feel hopeless to play against. It always feels like there's some out, and you guys are just playing this intense game of 40k together, like Lucas said. I never feel like they just slam their codex on the table and just beat me no matter what I do, like some of the broken armies that we've had at this edition. So I think, they're fine. Maybe they'll take over for the last part of the meta. Good. They're cool. It's
for
cool
sure
with me.
I think I personally would have liked to have seen a mild touch to Reality Rebels. I think that secondary is a little bit too much.
Yeah, that's
But
fair.
overall, I'm more or less of the same opinion. I'd much rather they get nothing than they get hammered, because I agree they're a ton of fun to play into and against. So that's overall a good situation to be in. Eldar
I
didn't
will
get any
say-
changes. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go back to demons real quick. I will say I'm glad they like with the flamer nerf, a bunch of different builds have emerged, which is super cool because a lot of people were complaining like before that, you know, the book was only viable in certain ways, and that's just not true from what we've seen. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I like that they've kind of just like tweaked that book here and there and then seen what happens, and people have proven how deep it really is.
I think
Also,
the
if you
demons
think
are going to.
if you think flamers are like unplayable now, you should give them a shot because they're really good still.
They're actually
Absolutely.
they're not.
I think
broken.
that demons are going to get the award this year. Oh, that's fun. Let's have an episode before 9th ends with like an award show kind of vibe and hand out. That sounds like fun. Okay. Look forward to that in the future, y'all. I'm excited about this now. Okay. But focusing on what we're doing right now, I think that demons are going to get the award for most misunderstood codex on release. I think that if we go back and listen to everyone's hot takes about demons, there were like 2 very big hot takes. One of which was, this is super one-dimensional and boring. Like, oh, look, flamers are incredibly stupid. Here are our big monsters. Like this, like people were like, this is such a limited, shallow book. And that is not true at all. The book is crazy deep with lots of new stuff. And number 2 is the take that the troops are awful and unplayable. The troops are the best thing in the demons book. Horrors, fantastic. Demonettes, fantastic. Bloodletters, very good. Plague Bearers, not so much. But you have 4 fantastic troops choices, right? Get out of here. I think it's a fantastic book, and I think it's going to go down as one of the brightest points of 9th edition. More on that later when we get to the award show. It's going to be fun. Okay. Azriani, don't think got any changes. Don't think they needed any. They're doing pretty well. They're showing that they can stick it out and adapt. I don't think anyone's complaining about Eldar right now other than Lucas, because he hates elves.
I mean, they'd probably be a lot better if Indirect wasn't good in the game right now, but
yeah, I think if Desolation Marines were also removed from the game in this data slate, I think Eldar would start coming out as something in the S tier kind of range. But no.
Yeah, I will say I don't like play Eldar, but we have a buddy that does, and we were helping him play the other night. And just, I don't know, the fate dice mechanic, like once you play with it and you're like, oh, I can just like guarantee 2 of my plans happening this turn. It's just crazy. Like that
2.
army's.
What about 5? They have 5 free 6s every turn.
They do.
I'm talking about like the whole combo of like advance and charge, or like, you know, charge plus like 2 wounds, that sort of thing.
But the combo of that level of reliability with the level of speed that they have and the level of jank, it's very like. Yeah, I would. You're like, if I were not knee deep in GSC right now, I'd probably be playing elves. That looks like a ton of fun.
22 inch auto charge with my Banshees, Guide Doom. Thank you very much. Like. And then I'm gonna go do this over here, and the Baharoth's sleeping away, and he's scoring me another 7 secondary, and you can't touch him. Yeah, it is wild.
Eldar are very cool. If you're an elf player right now and you're feeling down on elves, look up, bro. Like, get back in the game because they're doing really well.
Go get 6 crowd runners and have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Or 9 or freaking 15 if you want. That's totally playable. CSM, no changes. I don't think.
Unfortunately,
which I think is a bummer. There is exactly 1 playable CSM model right now, and he's pretty good.
You're talking about Vashtor, right?
Oh, absolutely, dude. Cogs, let's go. For sure. So that is what it is. I don't know what I would want to see for them in a data slate though that would make them better. I think they need some points drops right now. I don't think there's anything in CSM that fundamentally needs to be buffed. The units
they were so good with AOC, and then they got some points increases in the recent slate, right? Or not the recent
Chaos Terminators went up like 5 or 10 points or something. While Imperial Terminators went like down 5 or 10.
All of that data was drawn from them having AOC. So it's like, not only do we take away this and then bump your points up a bunch, like what? And then people were gearing up to kill Deathwing Terminators. Like, all right, buy power armor. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they could give that codex back AOC and just not give it to World Eaters. Who knows? But they didn't, so they're gonna run around and be okay for the rest of the edition.
Yeah, I think it's pretty understandable to not want to mess with anything that major this close to the end of an ed. I think that this data slate felt very, let's not create a monster. I think this was a very safe, let's try to deal with stuff. So I'll have big picture ideas in a minute, but cool. AdMech definitely didn't get touched. I think they've taken about as much of the brakes off of AdMech as they possibly could at this point, given that the AdMech data slate is at this point just buffs, and I don't think the FAQ got changed. Cool. There was like 10 minutes there where we thought AdMech might be what's up. They're probably not. It's a bummer. Nothing else to say on that?
No.
Cool. All right, let's talk about finally one of the best changes in the data slate. It's the Tyranids changes. Woo! Tyranids being completely unjustified in how much everyone has been hating on them. There was definitely no point where we were the most dominant force in the meta, and it wasn't close for a long fucking time. Definitely not one of the most dominant forces to ever touch Warhammer. But we got some changes back, and we got exactly the change, some of exactly the changes that I wanted back, and also a couple of other ones, which is nice. So first off, most important, the best of the best, the cream of the crop. We got adaptive, wow, it's been a while. What is it even called? Hyper adaptations, hyper adaptability, whatever it's called. It's back. You're getting your
too much.
But also like I haven't gotten to use this rule in like a year.
Yeah, they removed it instantly for some reason.
It was definitely not the problem. So what that means is that we're back in the saddle for NIDS, where after you know who's going first, you get to pick half of your subfaction trait, which is super fun, super thematic, very Tyranidy. Let's just be a lot more adaptable. Let's NIDS slot into this sort of under the radar toolboxy kind of build, which again, I always just wish I had more time. I would super love to be exploring that right now. There's some stuff in there for sure that has a lot of teams play, I think, in particular. So really interesting stuff going on in Tyranids. Definitely not going to be back on top anytime this edition, but Tyranid players have plenty to look forward to in 10th with infinite new models, so I don't think anyone's complaining too hard. They also made a couple other changes. They got rid of two things about your Warlord. Number one, the Hive Tyrant no longer has to be the Warlord, which is weird. I don't know why you would that seemed like a very normal rule that a lot of people have. I don't know why that had to. Okay, cool. I guess their thought being with Overrun being nerfed now, a fly rent is a trade piece, and they don't want you to sell your Warlord up a creek just because you wanted to bring exactly one Hive Tyrant with wings. So appreciate it. The bigger deal, which I think is the thing that actually matters, is they got rid of the caveat that said that to use Synaptic Imperatives, your Warlord had to be on the table. So if your Warlord is a Hive Tyrant, you can ship him up a creek and still have Synaptic Imperatives, which is great. That was like basically what they did is they took both of the first round of nerfs, which were trying to be light-handed and not too much, and make things finessey and complicated, and said, hey, we beat you guys into the ground. You don't need the finessey nerfs anymore. Just the beatdown is fine. So we'll pull those back. Not going to change a ton where NIDS line up, but I'm really excited because it's going to make the army a lot more fun to play, which I think is what matters at the end of the day for the end of an edition, for a codex in retirement, as it were. Anything else you guys want to add about the Tyranid changes?
Nope.
Do you think they're going to break 45% one right now?
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I have so many tournaments lined up. I might take Tyranids to one of them. At least in RTT.
No, we need Harry to lose this bet, not Lucas.
Well, don't worry.
There are ways that I can make sure Tyler will lose all 5 of his games.
You can only pair into me once, Lucas.
I have a lot of money in my savings account.
All right, bro. Cool. So that's Tyranids. It's looking great. Very exciting changes. Nothing for Death Guard. Death Guard are going to chill for the rest of the edition. Yeah. And now we get to another army that has been in not quite nearly as retired as Tyranids, but is certainly not the dominant meta force that it used to be, and that's the Tau. What happened to Tau, Lucas?
I think they just got core on broadsides back.
Yeah, absolutely. How do we feel about that?
Fine, I guess. I feel like it doesn't really mesh with Tau's identity of like the anti-shooting army, which is where I feel like they slot in the best right now. because the rest of Tao's army is either like lookout surge or fire and fades, you can basically shoot your opponent's army infinitely and then hide behind walls. So it's very difficult for an opposing shooting army to respond in kind. Broadsides can't do that as well. I don't think they can fire and fade, right?
Are they not jetpacks?
They definitely don't have jetpacks. I don't know if that's still a keyword that it goes off of. I can look that up real quick. Strike and fade. Strike and fade is jetpack unit, which broadsides do not have jetpacks.
So like they're going to be the one unit that's sitting out in the open and it's just going to get killed. And the rail rifle is a great gun. So is I don't actually know if the missile pod's a great gun, but I think that what broadsides have to slot into now is like the rail rifle is basically there for unobscurable targets, and they are a smart missile system platform. And then also every once in a while you're going to have a proper exposed turn, and you're going to pack them with enough shield drones that they can handle it. So I think there's going to be some amount of play there. I think if you're a Tau player, you should try it out. They seem okay walking in from strat reserves because they've got they can move and fire heavy. We'll see. If they're walking from strat reserve, they're not going to hit with Shadow Sun's buff, which is the main reason you want them to have core again. So yeah,
I don't know. They'll get real ones to hit at least from commanders, which is something. But
I'm not super sold on it. I'm sure people will experiment, but I don't think it's going to shake up the meta in any really meaningful way. This was another one like in the previous balanced data slate with AdMech, and in this current data slate with Drukari, just reverting old changes to make quality of life for codexes that aren't at the top of the meta a little bit better. I'm a fan. I don't think it's going to shake anything up too much. Yeah.
If you play Tau and you love broadsides, maybe give them a try, but don't worry if you don't play Tau. Cool. Necrons, nothing changed. And that brings us down to what I know is the changes that Lucas has been waiting for the longest time. Nick, why don't you break down what happened to Guard?
Yeah, Guard got some much needed changes. The first off is the one to the Kazarkin stratagem. I guess it's the overcharged Lascel stratagem, but this was used in combo with the Kazarkin. So how it used to work before was the stratagem was it could inflict up to 6 mortal wounds per unit at targets. So they would often teleport, jump out of a chimera, come in from strat reserves, split fire into 3 units, and do 6 mortals to each unit for 18 mortals. Now the stratagem says that the stratagem or a unit can only inflict a maximum of 6 mortal wounds per phase as a result of the stratagem. So if they split fire, I guess you could do like 2-2-2. You also might just assign 6 to the first thing you resolve your shots against. So it's just basically point at one target and do a bunch of damage to it now, which is a much needed change. For an 100-point unit, spending 2 CP to do 18 mortals was ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all knew this was coming a mile away. We were all very confused when it didn't happen in the frickin' FAQ. The fact that they put it in the data slate and not in an updated Guard FAQ is kind of weird and concerning to me. Like, this is not a balance issue. This is an FAQ issue. But
it's funny because AdMech had the same exact stratagem and they FAQ'd it to cap at 6.
Yeah.
Like that's letting the Kazakh walk around for 6 months doing it, I guess. I don't know.
There's not going to be another data slate, and the Guard FAQ is Guard Codex is going to be no longer relevant when 10th comes out. So it's not like this could ever change. But if this were not the last balanced data slate of the edition, the idea in my head that they genuinely think this is something that they could take away later and just put back on if Guard got weaker made me nervous. But no, that's not the word.
Ridiculous.
What about what else though? There was a second change here. Yeah. I think this one is a little bit more controversial.
One other main thing that people were complaining a lot about Guard, which is the relic, the Finial, the Nemredesh First. That is the flag relic that you put on the command squad that gives a 6-inch aura from the unit of a bunch of different buffs. One of the buffs is ignoring all hit mods. Yeah, not ballistic
hit and ballistic skill. Oh, it just hit mods, not ballistic skill.
Ignore ballistic skill. Yeah, so ignore dense cover, ignore LFR, ignore smoke launchers, ignore the heavy penalty. Any -1 to hit that's not like shooting out of line of sight, it would ignore. And then the second part of it was ignoring any rules your enemy has that ignores when they lose. So like wound caps, feel no pains, -1, half damage, etc. Anything like that, just ignored when a unit within 6 of this unit shoots, a core unit within 6 of this unit shoots. Both of those very strong. I think the second half, a lot more people were annoyed about because one of Guard's distinct weaknesses before this codex was being a mostly monophase army. So wound cap models were a good counter to Guard. And I knew that they were introducing some things like Rough Riders and like Bullgrins were getting a little bit better. So it's like if the Guard player chose to make a choice to start putting some melee in their list, then they have at least 2 phases of damage. But the filial just says like, lol, just my army stands around this flag and I kill your wound cap model. You know, Abaddon's a little tougher because he's Lookout Sword, but every other wound cap model in the game, I guess besides Phoenix Lords, aren't Lookout Sword. So
yeah, the Bloodthirster, the Catan, Gazgul, just pick them up. Pick them up.
Yep. And what they removed is they removed the aura of ignore hit mods. So not the ignore wound cap, feel no pain, damage reduction one, but the hit mods one. So people are like, I think, yeah, what do we think about this? How do we feel about this?
I think it's a good change. I think it is. I was really hoping they were going to change something about the flag because it was very obviously the most insane relic in the book and probably one of the most insane relics in the game. Yeah, giving off an aura from a unit, but really from a flag, but no, it's from the unit of ignore all 4 of those things was absolutely ridiculous. So I'm glad they changed it. I think I don't think. I think it's fairly obvious that ignoring hit mods is the less important part of that package compared to ignoring things that ignore wounds. But I'm just glad we got something. I think the 2 things that could have changed were what they did, which was removing hit mods, or just making the aura come from the flag itself. I think that also would have been a fine change. I'm just happy it got changed at all because there was some rumor, some talk going around that it was just going to stay the same. So I'm glad that got love tapped a little bit.
Yeah,
but
I think that this is. I think this is a really exciting change, particularly insofar as it gives Guard a little bit more obvious counterplay in that suddenly hit mods are a really big issue for them. This is a BS4 army that is hopefully getting +1 to hit from a couple different sources. There's an order to hand the Sentinels +1 to hit. There's the turret weapon rule giving a lot of the tanks +1 to hit, and that order is also giving it to the infantry, which means that obviously the turret weapon was always, you could always counteract this because it wasn't core, but on Sentinels and on infantry, especially Kasrkin, which I think we can all agree you'll still be taking, they just do quite slightly less absurdity in terms of damage. Suddenly, if you can be -2 to hit, you're getting hit on 5s. And that is massive. I think that means that if you can be in a forest, or if you play on WTC, if you can be on a vent, if you can be in an industrial structure, technical terminology from the GT pack, these are sorts of things that are suddenly going to be a massive problem for Guard players just to work their way through in the way that they kind of are for Tau, except Tau still have the Crisis Suit unit, which can blow through it. Now Guard have nothing that ignores hit mods. I think this is going to give, as a GSC player, I'm ecstatic about this because suddenly bikes become wildly viable into Guard. I feel very comfortable going back, being whole hog on 30 bikes at this point. Yeah, I think this is a great change. I think it taps Guard, and I think that this is going to put Guard back in the right place. They're a very, very good army still. They're just a little bit less silly, and there's a little bit more you can do about it, which I think is basically all you can ask for out of a data slate.
Yeah, I think this removes a lot of the feels bads of Guard. Obviously, the Kasrkin change was necessary. It wasn't a nerf; it was a fix. That unit was absolutely broken. But it also introduces a lot of removal of a lot of the feels bads of my forest doesn't matter, my LFR doesn't matter, my feel no pain doesn't matter, my wound cap doesn't matter. The only thing that's going to save me is being behind a wall, and even then I'm going to get mortared and shot with Kasrkin. This is stupid. So there's now
batteries now.
There's a lot more counterplay of you can actually use terrain and position on the board to impact how hard you're going to get shot. And those are really wonderful changes. And it's going to make Guard a little bit more palatable to play against.
Yeah. I think this really decreases the efficacy of Guard Indirect in general, because Guard are being able to take aim to mortars and to I literally just said what they're called, Earthshaker carriages, because those are coming back apparently. David Gaylord is playing those now as a counter to Desolation Marines. Suddenly, those things could be hitting you on 6s if you're -2. Like that's
Were those
real
the ones
spicy.
Mac was into?
No, Max played field guns. Earthshaker bat carriages are the OG. Like it's a basilisk gun, but on like 4 legs.
I'll look up the data sheet right now, so because I've never heard of this thing.
Oh yes, it's
a world model.
Yeah, it's a Forge World model. It's like $150.
Oh, let's go, dude.
But and they're like 100 points. It's very funny, or 120. Check out 40K Fireside, by the way. If anyone who's listening right now doesn't know about 40K Fireside, very good podcast run by David Gaylord and Victor J. Yeah, that's the one.
Yo, this thing's funny,
isn't it?
All right, do you want me to read off what it does?
Yeah, go for it. Everyone's listening.
Can you guess the range of the gun? That's the funniest part.
120.
All right, Lucas, what's your guess?
I was thinking you're halfway there, Tyler.
We can hear that from Nick's mic.
Nice. It's 240 inch range. So yeah, have fun shooting anywhere on the board.
I think those. No, come on, that shit is so funny. We're halfway.
Oh no, it is. It
like
is.
300
It needs
range.
to. It's funny whenever you ask. I remember asking like guard players, like, where does your basilisk shoot? And they just like extend their tape measure as far as possible. And I'm like, all right, dude, put your tape measure away.
Go the full distance, and then be like, you got another one of these? I've only got a 10-foot tape measure. I have a 20-foot tape measure.
So it's D6 plus 3 shots, blast, strength 10, AP 3, 2 damage. And then
you take aim it, so it's AP 4. Yeah.
And it's going to be back to hitting on 3s.
It'll be ballistic skill 5. Well, ballistic skill 5 plus 1 minus 1, so hitting on 5s.
Assuming you're in a.
Why is it base ballistic skill 5?
Base ballistic skill 4. And
then why another?
You make it ballistic skill 5 because it's indirect, and then they take aim in, and then you're standing in a forest and/or great because you're not an idiot.
Oh, sure, yeah, for sure. Yeah. If you can stand in a great, you'll get hit on 5s. If you can also pop smoke, you'll get hit on 6s. But if dense is not readily accessible to you, it could be hitting you on 4s.
Over in Yieldy, England, they might not have forces in their DZs on their fixed terrain sets. So.
All right, I know they don't. They like playing on Planet Bowling Ball because their terrain is so much better than ours.
It's so much better. Fixed terrain sets are fantastic.
So yeah, these are pretty funny. Okay.
Yeah, Gaylord is taking them to, I think it's the London Open. Is that what it is? Anyway, so we'll see how that goes. That's guard for you. We'll see what they end up looking like. I think they're very much still a relevant faction, but a little bit less silly now, and I hope that that pans out. Orcs,
surprisingly,
they lost Dawa. What a crazy change. Lucas isn't even paying attention to what I'm saying. And he's muted.
What?
Anyway, no changes for Orcs.
No. There's a change.
There's a change? What change?
Yeah,
for
we get +2 strength now. Strength 8 boys.
Oh, you witch brother. All right, Orcs. I think that a lot of us were expecting to see good bits get tapped because that secondary is, I think it's now the silliest secondary in the game.
No, Inflexible's also on the table, dude.
Bits. My bits are better than yours.
I think I've stopped Inflexible. I've never stopped bits.
My bits are better than yours. Your bits
and like
suck.
it also has the downside of like if you want to yeet Casterkin across the table, then you're sacrificing some points there, right? There's and also like if you get tabled as a guard player, like you're not getting Inflexible turns 3, 4, 5. If you get tabled turn 3 as an Orc player, you probably still got a 15 on bits.
Okay. I mean, if you're tabling guard players, then I don't think you have a problem with Inflexible. Nice job there, buddy.
But like but what I'm saying is that like it can't be a better secondary than one that in that amount of time gets 15. Like
I think this is a relatively moot point, guys. Like they're both insane secondaries.
The moral of the story is bits did not get tapped.
It definitely should have been nerfs.
It definitely freaking should have. But that's fine. That's fine. It's whatever. We got a lot of other things that I care more about than that. There just happen to be some Orc players in my local meta that are pretty good, as it turns out. So that's how it goes. Sisters also unchanged, and Custodes. Last change other than the secondary changes that we'll talk about in a sec. Custodes got a really interesting nerf. What was the Custodes nerf, Nick?
So they can no longer use genetic alchemy or arcane genetic alchemy, which is transhuman, and Emperor's Auspice, which is turn off rerolls on the same unit in the same phase. So you can't do the whole, oh, you're targeting me, 2 CP, do no damage. You can't do that anymore. You have to decide transhuman or no rerolls. So
bring me those delicious, sweet golden tears, Custodes fans. Glorious.
So I was thinking about this actually before we started our show today, because I was like, where is this most relevant, right? Like, which armies out there really hated transhuman and really hated the rerolls being turned off? Like, for example, something like World Eaters and Orcs without transhuman, like wound Custodes on like 2s, but they have no rerolls, so this doesn't really change like the matchup into Custodes as much. You just play it the same way. Yeah, something like Votan, for example. Transhuman didn't matter so much because, I mean, at least if they have no judgment tokens on them, like early game, yeah, I guess like the turn off rerolls and the transhuman was good, but you're just going to turn off rerolls because you're probably going to have 2 or 3 tokens on you, and they're going to ancestral judgment to try to reroll the hits. So I don't know. There's definitely like a few out there, like Marines, like with
Marines,
coming in there.
Quality of high strength shooting is now just like you can actually push through as opposed to just getting completely canceled.
Iron Hands definitely get a lot better into Custodes.
I think it's also pretty meaningful for guard. Not being able to get your glorious horsey boy rerolls is a massive bummer for them. And they would also sure love to wound you real good. There's also a lot of instances where Tau set, absolutely. Anyone who's trying to overcharge a lot of stuff is real bummed by this. So I think it's like you said, though, it's not like when Custodes first got hit and both of those stratagems basically went away. It's not that, right? They're totally still getting to be very durable. They're still going to be very relevant in the meta, just a little bit less so. And I'm kind of with Lucas here. Any nerf for Custodes is a buff for the game, so I'm a fan.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a lot more cool than just being like 2 CP, do no damage to me this turn. It's stuff. I like it.
Yeah,
I just like it because it makes Custodes worse.
All right,
100% agree. Golden Boys can go back.
Yeah, rotten hell. You guys suck.
All right, cool. Let's talk about some of the
secondaries.
Cool. Let's talk about some of the secondaries that got changed. We already talked about Codex Warfare, which is real big. We already talked about Call Order, which is real big, but there are 2 more secondaries relevant. Let's do the faction relevant one, and then we'll talk about the actual. We'll start with
the T-Sons one next, dude. The big T-Sons change.
Yeah, the big T-Sons change. We'll say that for last. All right. Biggest change in the game, that one. So the big thing was the big question mark for me personally in this Dataslate is what are we going to do to GSC? GSC have a really interesting win rate breakdown. I was reading about it on Goonhammer today. If you take their full data set, which is GTs, RTTs, and practice games, GSC have a 52% win rate. If you look at just the GTs with data set, they jump all the way up to 56. And if you look at just experienced players, veterans at GTs, they jump all the way to 58. Right? So this is an army that evidently the more narrowly you're looking at it, the better they're getting. And the stronger players are doing insanely well with them. But they're doing real crap, evidently at the lower tables, which is dragging that rate 8 back down for people who don't know what the hell they're doing, which is part of why I love the army so much. There's a lot of you, but when you are willing to provide that, you get sick dividends. And the change that we got for GSC, there were a lot of people saying a lot of different possibilities, but I think we all kind of agreed that points was where it was going to come because that's where the army feels silly. And that secondary is Brood Swarm, which previously was 1 point for outnumbering your opponent by model count within your own DZ, another point for outnumbering by model count in no man's land, a 3rd point for outnumbering by model count in your opponent's DZ, a 4th point for outnumbering in models anywhere on the table as a whole. You can get any combination of those 4 points. And then if you get all 4, buy 4, get 1 free, you get 5 points for outnumbering your opponent in all 3 zones and the table at large. We got 2 changes to the secondary. The first of which I think was really necessary, which is actually in the FAQ. They specify that it is now models wholly within instead of just models within. The fact that you could go first, stay behind the walls that are just outside your DZ, and like turn all your bikes sideways and line your neophytes up along the edge, and suddenly you're counting as being in 2 places at once. Very silly. Glad that got fixed. Was enjoying abusing it, but it was necessary. And then secondarily, on the data slate itself, they made 2 changes. They got rid of the point for the table at large, so it's just one zone, middle zone, opponent's zone. And they got rid of the buy 4, get 1 free. So it caps at 3 points now per turn, and you got to outnumber your opponent with models wholly within your DZ, their DZ, and no man's land to get those 3 points. The secondary is bad.
Yeah, it's
outnumber.
Worse.
Yes, it goes from one of the freest 15s in the game to an 8 stretch 12. Really stretching that 12 there. Because you're going to get, assuming you go first, you'll get 2 points on turn 1, you'll get 3 points on turn 2, maybe you'll get 3 points on turn 3, and then turn 4 and 5 you'll get like 1. So let's say it's 3, 6, 8. Yes, maybe you can get 10 if you play your cards right. That sounds pretty reasonable, depending on. Obviously, you get a lot more if you're dominating, but it's okay. I think that GSC players, however, don't care at all. I think that this is the lightest wrist slap we could have asked for. Ambush is still ludicrous. As soon as you learn how to play into it, that secondary just racks up points like they're going out of style. And behind enemy lines is still there. Obviously, they didn't touch that. It's a BRB secondary that everyone's got access to. GSC just happened to be especially good at it. And we got a bunch of OBSEC troops rather that want to be in your backfield as is. So we'll rack up some CP while we're doing it. That's real cool. But between that as being available, our action secondaries are still really good, either banners or R&D, depending on what you're building for. Still really good. Ambush still really good. And then obviously there are kill secondaries that can sub in really easily. Ambush being in no mercy, no respite, not a purge, or no, it's a purge the enemy, not a no mercy, no respite. I always get those two mixed up. You can stack it with no prisoners is the moral of the story. So if prisoners is an option, you can take that. Grind is sometimes an option, you can take that. GSC secondaries are just fine. They're still a fantastic army, and no major rule changes means they're still going to be a very dominant force. Any further thoughts on that, guys?
No. I'm glad that they nerfed Broodswarm because, like you said, it was one of the freest 15s in the game, despite forcing you to Behind, which is now better than Broodswarm. Like, Behind, at least to me, feels like a secondary your opponent can somewhat play around. Like, they can screen out their DZ. You aren't like Eldar, where you're rocketing 30 inches across the board and putting a unit back there and scoring 3 points. You're getting to take advantage of whittling away at their army or like having to charge and like consolidate. I know like the bike build can definitely get some behind early with the bikes, but like having to be wholly within your opponent's DC when the bikes want to string out, it's a choice now. Exactly. I like that it's like a secondary. It's like you're choosing to like commit to their DZ rather than just wandering around on the board and going like, hey, I got 15 points.
Yeah. The fact that with Broodswarm, you could not have a single model exit your deployment zone. You just have enough models touch that line, and you could score 15 points doing that because you outnumber your opponent in no man's land, your DZ, and the table, 3 a turn. Very stupid. Very stupid. Glad to see that gone. I'm excited. I think it's going to make GSC just it's another thing you're going to have to think about now, which is great. The more you have to think about that army, the more fun I have playing it. The more I run up against the clock, but that's a problem for another show.
Yeah.
Cool.
I definitely thought, a lot of people thought they were going to do something about the cult system because people were saying like the whole ignore hit mods and baby transhuman. And you also get 2 other things.
And 6 up feel no pain and 4-inch pile console or 6s are plus an AP and melee. Yep.
I think people were saying that the like ignore hit mods should probably just ignore the heavy penalty, or it should cost 2 points, and the baby transhuman should maybe cost 2. There were a lot of different ideas I heard. I honestly really feel like GW doesn't really quite understand the best way to balance that, so they just like let it be.
I think at the end of the day, I think you just didn't want to get that in the weeds about the situation. And I think that with the introduction of Desolation Marines, GSC are falling like a rock out of the very, very top. So I don't think I don't think they're going to be putting up the tournament numbers that they used to be anyway. So we'll see how that shakes out. That one guy says that Myriad Cults are so last week. Rusted Claw is so hot right now. Rusted Claw is a ton of fun. I'm not convinced that it's better just yet, but it's definitely would be if they had basically said Myriad Cults can suck it. I absolutely would be all in on the Rusted Claw at this point. It's a ton of fun. I highly recommend that build. Hopefully, we'll have a bit wrap up with it sometime in the next couple of weeks because it's just a lot of fun. Sweet. All right, Lucas, talk to us about Thousand Sons, faction in need of buffs that got a hell of a buff. What happened?
Oh, I'm so glad they buffed their secondaries, boys. So many points for the Thousand Sons. And by that, I mean so many points not for their opponent, sort of.
I
so Abhor the Witch got moved to Purge the Enemy, which is such a huge Thousand Sons buff and really fixes their lack of AOC and Flamers now.
100%.
Honestly,
Rest
more
in
of a Grey
peace.
Knights buff.
Rest in peace, Thousand Sons Kings.
It's a demons buff to me. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't double dip. If your opponent's taking like 4 big Psyker characters, you can't like double dip.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. What I always heard from T-Suns players, though, was, and I mean, this was back in the glory days of T-Suns. I'm sure now they probably wouldn't feel the same way. But if their opponent took both Assassinate and Abhor, it was like, nice, dude, because it was really hard to kill T-Suns characters. And it's actually used to be surprisingly hard to fully wipe out T-Suns units, which is what you needed to get the, 2 points on Abhor. Like, go kill 30 Terminators, get 6 points. Nice work, dude. Like, however, T-Suns are a lot less durable just with AOC going away and with like the level of killingness going up in the game and people having found all these combos that could have killed Dark Angels Terminators. So, I mean, that's why T-Suns were doing so poorly. So, yeah, unfortunately, they hyped up a big buff to them and didn't deliver. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they remember that T-Suns were doing poorly after they finished and like sent off the Dataslate to be copy edited and before they made the video about it. Because
it was funny to me that they like hyped it up in the article, and I don't really remember seeing any mention about the core change for Talos and Kronos or the Custodes change, which feels like 2 way bigger changes to me. So yeah.
Cool. All right, so that is all the changes. We've run through all the stuff, and now is the interesting part. How do we feel like overall this is going to affect the meta? How do we think it's going to affect what we're playing personally and how we're interacting with it? Time for big, grandiose thoughts and reflections and hot takes that will be clipped and shown to us that we were terribly wrong in 2 weeks.
I'm a big fan of a lot of these changes. I feel like they remove a lot of the Field's bads that were at the top of the meta of, here's my 100-point unit that does 18 mortal wounds. Here's my 30 Terminators that will never die all game. Here are my Devastators and Desolators and Iron Hands that are going to get me 15 points in 1 turn for shooting you. Like those were all situations that felt horrible. And now a lot of them have been either toned back or removed altogether, which I'm just a huge fan of. Also really nice that kind of a theme of this data slate has been taking people that have seen previous nerfs that are now unjustified and reverting those nerfs, kind of in line with what they did with AdMech last patch. Super big fan of that. Gives big fans of those particular factions some additional play, some additional stuff to experiment with in the last couple months while we're all kind of waiting for 10th. Big fan of that. I think Drukari, Tau, and then AdMech, like I said, will all have a little bit of play. They almost certainly won't be at the top of the meta, but they might actually be able to accomplish something at tournaments and get some podiums, placings, or even like win a couple isolated events, which is going to be really cool. Yeah, I am overall a big fan of a lot of these changes. Obviously, there's more things that I would have liked to have seen. I'm never going to be completely satisfied with GW's changes, but overall, I think this was a very successful patch.
Yeah, I agree too. I think there's still, unfortunately, a little bit of that issue of haves and have-nots in regards to faction secondaries and like auto 15s when we were talking about inflexible and good bits, and I mean like pile the skulls. Like these are reality rebels. These are all secondaries that are like far too easy to score. I think GW is just kind of like not trying to get into the weeds with it though, like what Tyler was saying, because they're focusing more of their efforts on just like rebalancing for the next edition. Maybe faction secondaries out of the game, who knows, or like a more balanced way of scoring. And it kind of felt like they didn't want to go too heavy-handed and like delete Sling from the game, unfortunately, for the last few months. It was just like removing some unjustified nerfs. And I like what they did with Archangels, at least. Like, I know with like Quins and Nids last year, they kept doing small changes here and there, and they were still just dominant for like 9 more months. The Dark Angels, like, they could have been like baby transhuman, but like this is the last patch. So they were just like, we don't want a shove forward, drew on the table, 62% win rate army just being the best army in the game for the last 3 months of the edition. We're just gonna get that out of the game. And like, you can still play some cool builds with them. Like, I know a lot of people have been like showing Ravenwing builds and stuff, but now, I mean, it's much more reasonable. Feels like there's a lot of armies in that like 52 to 56% band, which is pretty cool. The game still feels a little rock, paper, scissors-y right now, but hey, at least you're going to see like a wide variety of armies when you go to a tournament. I think it'll be a fun way to close out the edition.
For sure. Yeah. I'm largely on board. Taos asked about Iron Hands. We touched on them a little on the front end. I think that they not getting like the nerf, the Iron Hands did get one targeted nerf, which is that they specified that the character Dreadnought cannot take a character-only elite slot. I know there was some contention about whether or not that was legal, rules as written as is, and they said, nope, no, it does not, which is the most mild nerf that I could have come up with for that. Obviously, the Codex Warfare change is going to affect them pretty intensely. That is not an army that is trying to get out of Dev Doctrine ever. So they're just not going to take that secondary anymore. And the things that you have to replace it with, things like Oaths of Moment, things like what's it called? Shock Tactics are not necessarily as catered to the Iron Hands playstyle as a lot of other options are. So I think we'll be scoring a little bit less ludicrously now, which is nice. But very little. By little, I mean literally nothing was done to tone down their kill power. And that, I think, is the part of Iron Hands that people are still very scared of when it comes to that faction. We're going to be testing it out a lot in the coming weeks, because if it is the new big bad, we all got to be ready for it. Not to say it wasn't the old big bad, frankly, but it is what it is. I think overall, the Dataslate does a really good job of bonking some people. I think the guard changes are fantastic. I think the secondary changes are excellent. I think Abhor is a bit of a joke, but sure, why not? And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this shakes out. For those of y'all who are fans of the show and are looking forward to seeing what else we've got coming up, we have a ton of tournament coverage coming up in the next couple of weeks. We got a couple of RTTs, which are kind of whatever, and then we have a GT at the end of the month, followed by a 2 or 3 week break, and then we'll have BAO. We'll have our team tournament, and then we'll have a week off, and then another GT up here in Portland. And by then, I think we'll be all 10th ed ready. So I'm feeling real good. I think it's going to be a fun way to close out the edition, and I'm looking forward to whatever comes next. Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Let's shout out Brood Wars before we finish it up?
Absolutely. If you are anywhere near the Pacific Northwest and you're not going to Kansas City Teams, but you wish you were going to Teams, because of course you do. Teams is the best. Team 40K is the best 40K. And then you should come on up to Olympia, Washington. We're having a 5-man teams event. We got 12 teams registered at the moment, with more that I know are happening. So it's going to be pretty serious. We got 5 rounds of team play, 5-mans using differential scoring. It's going to be a real good time. Check it out, Brood Wars, Pecking Order Brood Wars. You can find it on BCP. If you're having trouble finding it, DM one of us and we'll get you that. It's going to be hype. We've also got, like I said, that big GT coming up in June. That's the Stumptown Slam. If y'all like our Brood Wars, not Brood Wars, our Rosehammer coverage, it's the same dude in the same place doing the same thing. It's going to be awesome. So definitely look forward to that as well. Tau Tipping's already sold out, so I don't need to show that, but that's going to be a lot of fun. So there's sort of our big picture public plugs, private plugs. Definitely, if you want to keep the conversation going, you can check out our Discord, which you can access through YouTube membership or Patreon support. Appreciate either one of those. Make sure to check us out on YouTube. We've got more bit reps going up all the time, as well as all of this stuff if you want to see our lovely faces while we're talking. We usually go live Saturdays at 10 a.m. on YouTube. Today's a little bit different because we wanted to, get that Dataslate coverage out as quickly as possible, but that should be good fun. If you like our silly little way over there, we got our silly little icons. We sell those on t-shirts, mugs, and tumblers over at bestintabletop.com/store. Make sure to check out some of the other shows in the program, including This Week in 40K, the original Best in Faction, and I think those are the only other shows that are happening regularly right now because Better Human, Better Gamer is going on hiatus for the time being. More shows coming out soon, though. It's going to be very exciting. But I think I've shielded enough. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and review on whatever sort of platform you may be enjoying. Thank you so much for joining us. And with all that being said and done, I've been Tyler.
I've been Nick.
And I'm Lucas.
And we'll see you next time for, I don't know, maybe some 10th stuff. Oh my God.
Incredible.